Hey gang, and welcome back. Just a reminder, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com. You'll get 10% off orders over $10 and help with the channel at the same time. That is right, based on the thumbnail, I'm sure you figured it out, this is a Cons of Tarkir gameplay video. I mean, in so much as we're only using legendaries from Cons of Tarkir. I am playing Kai's Anafenza the foremost deck, and keep a hand with Plains, 2 Swamps, Slaughter Pact, Tainted Wood, Altar of Bone, and Cultivate. Pat, who's new to the channel, is playing Zurgo and keeps an opener with World Slayer, Kursari Gamma, Sword of the Animist, Boros Signet, Phyrexian Reclamation, Ancient Den, and a Swamp. James, who's also new to the channel, is playing Narset and keeps a hand with Hollowed Fountain, Mountain, Sacred Foundry, Tranquil Cove, Worn Power Stone, Parallax Wave, and Dig Through Time. Kai is playing his Surrak deck and keeps a hand with Island, Timestream Navigator, Rishkar's Expertise, Hinterland Harbor, Game Trail, Archaeomancer, and Mind's Dilation. I win the die roll and start us off. I play a Swamp and pass. Kai plays a Game Trail tapped and passes to Pat. Pat plays a Swamp and casts that sweet turn 1 Phyrexian Reclamation. James draws and is pretty disappointed by the fact that he was 1 card away from drawing Leyline of Anticipation in his opener. He plays a Tranquil Cove, gaining 1 life as it comes into play tapped and passes. I play Tainted Wood and pass turn. Kai plays an Island and casts Explorer. He draws and then plays Hinterland Harbor. I call shenanigans and Kai claims he's just playing fair magic. Pat plays an Ancient Den and casts a Boros Signet. James plays a tapped Sacred Foundry and passes. I play a Plains and cast Cultivate to grab 2 forests, 1 for the field and 1 for my hand. Kai has no land for turn and instead plays a Timestream Navigator and passes. Pat can't live his dream of getting Zurgo out by turn 3 and instead has to settle for a plain old Nodashi. James draws and plays a Mountain. He then plays a tapped Worn Power Stone and passes turn. I play a Forest and I cast a Commander Sphere before bringing out Anafenza. Kai is feeling the pressure and can't find a land, so he casts Ponder to look at the top 3. He puts them back on top in any order of his choosing and draws before playing a Carplusian Forest. Pat plays a Plains and he and I both realize that Zurgo costs 5, so our dream of him coming out on turn 3 was dead anyways. Pat instead has to settle for more equipment and casts Kursari Gamma before passing to James. James takes 2 to have Hollowed Fountain come into play untapped, and I die a little inside as Narset hits the field. I play a Swamp and pay 4 to cast a Core Prowler. Oh yeah, did I mention this Anafenza is built around Infect? Moving to combat, I apologize to James, having only met him an hour before, and swing Anafenza at him as when you play against a Narset deck, you pretty much have to focus her out. Kai casts a Temple of Discovery, and Pat and James take him up, while I refuse. James grabs a Temple of Epiphany, while Kai grabs Temple of False God and 2 islands. Pat grabs an Orzhov Basilica, bouncing his Ancient Den back to his hand. I suggest that people should have grabbed Arcane Lighthouse to deal with this. Kai then casts Archaeomancer, who returns as Explorer upon entering the battlefield. Pat plays a Mountain and casts Big Boy Zurgo. Moving to combat, James preemptively lowers his health on his tracking pad, and Pat agrees that he'll be swinging Zurgo at him. James actually plays an Ash Barrens, not cycling it, and casts Tenza Goda's Maul. He then casts the Leyline he drew earlier, and declares he's moving to combat. He swings Narset at Pat, and Narset's trio resolves, revealing 4 hits: Soul Ring, Darksteel Mutation, Sphere of Safety, and Jace Beleren. The mutation gets stuck onto Zurgo, and James is more than happy to cast the 3 remaining spells. Pat also takes 6 commander damage, and to curry some favor with the table, James upticks Jace to have everyone draw a card. I play a Llanowar Waste for my land for turn, and I realize I may actually have to win with Infect this game. Pat validates this by reminding me of what we're dealing with. Moving to combat, I swing Anafenza and the Core Prowler at James, using Anafenza's on-attack trigger to put a +1/+1 counter on the Prowler. James reminds me that I need to pay 3 per creature, which thankfully I have more than enough mana to do. During my second main phase, I cast Altar of Bone, sacrificing the Prowler to tutor for a creature card and proliferate as it dies. I give James another poison counter, and I'm almost tempted to give Jace another counter, but I stop myself. I grab Siege Behemoth, and I pass to Kai. Kai plays a Shivan Reef, and we realize he has the City's Blessing, which James is thankfully prepared for with the token. With nothing else, Kai passes to Pat. Pat plays an Ancient Den and casts Sword of the Anime. He then gears up Beetleborg Zurgo with the Sword of the Animist and Nodachi. Moving to combat, Pat wants to swing at James, but can't due to lack of mana. He decides to swing at me, and gets the sword trigger to go and find a basic. I then take 3 commander damage, and we move to James's turn. James plays an island for his land for turn, and pays 3 to cast Long-Term Plans, one of the strongest tutors for Narset. James then casts Aqueous Form, putting it on Narset and making her even harder to deal with, and swings Narset at me. He resolves the scry trigger first, and from the angle of the camera, we see that he bottoms a glacial fortress. He then reveals Izzet Signet, Mind's Dilation, Fractured Identity, and a mountain. James casts the Mind Dilation, but Kai has a response and casts Spell Swindle. This gives Kai 7 treasure tokens, and James then moves to cast his Signet, which happens. James then casts his Fractured Identity on the Archaeomancer, as he knows if he puts it on Timestream, Kai will just activate it to save the creature and get another turn. This gives everyone but Kai a token copy of the Archaeomancer, and James returns his long-term plans, while I grab a Cultivate, and Pat gets a heaping load of nothing. I then take 6 commander damage, and James upticks Jace once damage is done to have everyone draw a card, and pass his turn. I draw for my turn, and in my first main phase cast Sylvan Reclamation, targeting James' Sphere of Safety and Aqueous Form. James decides to respond to this, and delves away his graveyard, and pays the rest of Dig Through Time to try and find an answer. With the spell in the stack, Kai flashes in Surrak and lets the dig resolve. James chooses 2 cards, and the spell resolves, exiling the 2 enchantments. I then cast Cultivate, grabbing a Plains to the field and 1 to my hand, and play the Plains from my hand. I then swing Anafenza at James for what I hope are several obvious cards, reasons, and pass to Kai. For his turn, Kai sacrifices his remaining treasures to help cast his own copy of Mind's Dilation. Well, that's just great. With the spell in the stack, I cast Slaughter Pact on Surrak. Kai then explores once again, and James casts Cyclonic Rift, targeting Mind's Dilation. This triggers the Dilation to resolve first, and James exiles Aggravated Assault off the top of his library. Kai then plays an island, and activates his Timestream Navigator to take an extra turn. I crack my Sphere at the end of Kai's turn to draw a card. On Kai's second turn, he draws and recasts Mind's Dilation. With nothing else, he then passes to Pat. Pat plays a Bloodstained Mire for his land for turn, and moves to combat. He swings Burgo, which stands for Bug Zurgo, and his token, which is represented as a die, at James for 4. He gets the Sword of the Animus trigger, and grabs a Plains. Pat then casts World at War, which triggers Mind's Dilation. Pat reveals a Soul Ring, which Kai is happy to take. Pat then goes to a second combat step. This time, Pat swings his creatures at Kai for stealing his Soul Ring, and deals the same as he did to James. Pat then casts a Wayfarer's Bauble, and ends his turn after cracking the bauble to go and find a basic. James plays a Plains and recasts long-term plans, revealing an island off the top for the Dilation trigger. James then tutors for his card, and puts it third from the top. James then moves to combat, and swings Narset at Kai. James reveals Propaganda, a Plains, Omen Machine, and Sulphur Falls. Kai takes 6, and James casts both spells. In his second main phase, James upticks Jace, but no one can draw a card from the Omen Machine. James then casts Open the Armory, and goes into his library to grab a Batterskull. James then casts Batterskull, and Pat cracks his Bloodstained Mire to go and find Smoldering Marsh. Unfortunately, I commit a total faux pas on my turn, and forget to pay the upkeep cost of Slaughter Pact. I realize this will pop up in the comments, but we do play through it without realizing it, unfortunately. The worst part is, I have more than enough mana for it. I reveal a Plains from the Omen Machine, and put it into play. I then cast Behind the Scenes, which triggers the Mind's Dilation, and Kai gets to cast Skyshot Claim. I then cast Triumph of the Hordes, giving all of my creatures +1/+1 and Infect. I then move to combat and swing Anafenza at Kai for 5 Impact, and the Archaeomancer at James. I put a +1/+1 counter on the Archaeomancer from Anafenza, and James takes 3 Infect. And at the end of my turn, Kai recasts Surrak. Kai reveals and exiles an island, playing it. He then casts Asceticism, and follows up with a Savage Ventmaw. Thank goodness he doesn't have haste, as otherwise he would combo with Aggravated Assault, but instead Kai has to pass to Pat. On Pat's upkeep, he rebounds his World at War, and exiles a mountain from Mind's Dilation's trigger. He exiles a Plains with the Omen Machine, and gets to put it into play. Pat then casts World Slayer, and there's a sudden silence in the shop. James has no response other than to shake Pat's hand for a job well done, and the equipment resolves. He puts the World Slayer on Zurgo, and swings him at me. Pat connects, and the World Slayer trigger goes in the stack, and resolves. We all scoop up our permanents, except for World Slayer and Zurgo because they're indestructible or don't get hurt by the claws, and Kai, James, and I quickly realize when we're beat. Game review time. So, upkeep, pact, triggers, missing, oops. Unfortunately, I definitely should have lost earlier in that game, but thankfully Pat won pretty much the next turn, so it wasn't that big of a deal. I rarely enjoy playing Infect, but everyone else was playing a Cons commander, and I really wanted this to be sort of a themed game. Hopefully today's game is a good reminder as to why you should put a dice on top of your deck when you cast a pack spell, as a reminder. By the middle of the game, I thought for sure either Kai or James was going to win, since Mind's Dilation and Narset do a great job of cheating out spells. I think the game would have been even more degenerate had James been able to resolve his own copy of Mind's Dilation, so thankfully that didn't happen. I think the table criminally undervalued the Zurgo deck, and it just goes to show how one piece of equipment and no blockers can basically win the game for you. I will say that did require a lot of things being lined up perfectly, but Pat saw it and was able to go for it unhindered. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in part by support from my Patreons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit my Patreon link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.